That was quite a workout, Vanita. You really made it look so simple. So thank you for showing us how to stay fit, squeezing in time in our busy work schedules, and doing it every single day, all through the day that we sit on our laptops. Simple tips that I'm sure all of us can use every day. So as we go into the next extremely interesting session, I'd like to keep you for a while on tenterhooks, a little longer, to share who the winners from today are. I promise to announce it right after this session. So coming on to the next session, the technology sector has changed in so many ways from the time I started my career 2.5 decades ago. But today we have so much more diversity across all aspects of technology and in leadership positions. So it's my great pleasure to welcome one such remarkable technologist, Purnima Padmanabhan. She's a Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Cloud Management BU, VMware, and she talks to us about her personal journey in the technology sector. So on to you, Purnima.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to VMware Nirmaan 2021. My name is Purnima Padmanabhan, and I'm the Senior Vice President and General Manager for VMware's Cloud Management business. I'm very excited to be here with all of you. Technology is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's an honor to be able to address a group of technology leaders, and that too, women technology leaders. The topic I thought I would present and talk about was how to be like a leader. And of course, there isn't a very simple recipe book for this. As I was saying, okay, what makes a leader? What are the unique characteristics? A lot of times I find women, especially women product leaders, face some unique challenges and unique biases. So I thought I'd address that through a few anecdotes from my life and how those have shaped my thought process and what were my learnings from them. So I will talk definitely more about my role at VMware later, but I wanted to kind of start out. So I grew up in a small town in Rajasthan, in Kota, and it was a very nice environment, at least for me, to grow up. And often what I remember most is dinner table conversations with my parents, my mother, my father, and my brother, ranging on a whole range of topics, whether it is politics, whether it is sports, whether it is mundane topics, such as what's happening in and around the house and in and around the neighborhood. And having these discussions was very formative for me, is what I realized later, because it allowed all of us to have discussions, points of opinions, arguments, and be able to present thoughts and ideas in a very clear way. And that is where maybe I would go with the first tenet, which is mindset matters. If you think that you can contribute in a particular area and you are able to express yourself, and you yourself think that, yes, I can actually contribute to that area, then you will do well. Many times the doubt in our mind, whether am I a good enough technology leader? Am I making the right arguments? Am I driving the right decisions? That doubt often holds us back. While you should have always healthy skepticism about whatever you're doing, but having this key construct in your mind that, look, you can achieve whatever you set your heart towards is very important, and be able to present your opinions, thoughts, and ideas becomes very important. So I would say that was a very almost foundational, formative thing. It did not happen by design, but it is something that I believe has shaped my life. And while all of you may not have had the same dinner table conversations, it is something, if you're aware of your mindset, you can actually change the trajectory of whether the project that you're working on, the team that you're leading, the next aspirational goal that you want to pick up. And then growing up, right after in Kota, I ended up going to for my engineering college in Kota itself. It was University of Rajasthan. And I did that simultaneously while I was doing my bachelor's in Hindustani classical music. And it was a dramatic difference in the classes. In one class, I had all women in classical music, almost all women. And in the other class, which is for my engineering college class, at least during my time, at that time, still there were few women coming in. It was a class of hundreds with 2 women. So you can imagine the conversations were sometimes very hard. And often there were comments that would, if I could have construed as disparaging, right? Maybe women can't do certain things, women can't be part of machining labs, or, hey, look, I don't know how you ended up here. And that was, we were 2 to hundreds. So you could take on the entire audience, or you could say that, look, at some point, this is too much of a battle, and I'm not going to care what anybody says. So as you navigate through your life as a product leader, as a technology leader, there will be instances when you have to raise your voice and when you have to fight. And there'll be the other instances where you have to just steel yourself and say, it just doesn't matter. Their opinion doesn't matter. And the big difference, and I always jokingly say it's in the English language, are you the subject or an object of a sentence? Is someone doing something to you, or are you the subject and you are doing something? And so as long as I had the mindset that, oh my God, they are all talking about me, or they are talking, they believe that I can't do X, Y, Z, it was always, I'm the victim, I'm the subject. But if you turn that around and you become actually the object and the driver's seat, then you say that, look, I don't care what anybody says. I'm here for my education. I'm here for my passion here in this subject, and I'll continue to drive forward. So the takeaway is that there are some scenarios where you almost have to be like how the water slides off the duck's back, right? The wax coating doesn't let anything stick. There are times when you will, as you, through your career paths, depending on the stage you are in, especially early on, you may think you face bias, but it is a choice. You have a choice on whether you want to be the victim or whether you want to be in the driver's seat. And in sometimes it just is better to just ignore it and carve your path forward, through part the waters and move forward. And this is an important distinction because and as you all know, there are a lot of movements in across the world, in India and right here in US, where we talk a lot about how do you do more diversity and inclusion in technology? How do you eliminate bias? And when we say bias, this is bias for race, gender, educational background, the kind of technical area that you represent or the product area that you represent. People have all kinds of biases, right? And that is just a fact of matter. And so there is a fair amount of, I would say, almost crusading work that's happening in order to make sure that companies are able to look at diversity more holistically and promote more holistically. So while that is happening from an organizational front, right, this is a 1-2 punch. If you want to move forward in an industry, you can wait for the industry to change, but you also have to change your, as I said, mindset and your approach. And when you do this dual 1-2 punch, then you are able to progress forward in your career and have actually the voice to make that transformation. So there are some times in your career, as you look at the environment, you can choose to not engage with the bias and not engage with the surround, choose not to become the victim. And this was a very important lesson for me in my life. So then from after my college, I went and actually worked in Bangalore at Center of Development of Telematics, but then came to the US to do my master's in engineering. And then later, after a small stint in the industry, went back and got my master's in business administration. So I did my master's from USC and MBA from Stanford. And right out of college from Stanford, I ended up joining a company called LoudCloud. Amazing place. LoudCloud was, this was in 2000s, actually early 2000. LoudCloud was what I would say a company that was thinking about cloud before cloud, right? And it was founded by Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. And their idea was that, look, computing should not be captive in these desktops, laptops, and servers, either in data centers or sitting under somebody's desk, but it should be freed and should be made available to anybody just on tap. And that was the idea of utility computing or cloud computing. And it was an amazing journey because we were trying to transform not just build not just a product, but transform the entire industry's thinking, right? Today, when companies put applications on cloud, they don't even think about where the application resides. They know, okay, generally there is in a particular AWS region or a particular location, but they don't really care where their actual physical data resides, as long as they know that it's meeting the security guidelines. I still remember an interesting incident where, and I remember talking to a colleague and this was a woman colleague, she said, look, I somehow feel I can never be heard. There is so much passion, there is so much excitement, but there is this feeling that I go into a room and I can never be heard. And when I think back, right, yes, there were a lot of ideas, there were loud voices, there was a lot of excitement and passion. But when I break down the system again, one is I can say I'm not heard by them, or they don't listen to me. So in that particular case, they are the subject. Versus I can say, okay, there is something that I can do to be listened to. There is always a way to be heard. And often I hear both, I do a lot of mentorship and I hear both from men and women that I'm not heard. And so that is kind of my next tenet, which is you can always find a way to be heard. And I'm going to share my simple recipe. Let us say you are discussing a problem. If you can break down how you communicate into simple analytical ways, define the problem clearly, provide the assumptions that you're making, and then define the solution. If you are able to provide these clear picture of the problem, assumptions, and solutions, you often will find people will listen. A lot of times when people hear partial ideas or ideas that are still being formulated, then that is when the interruption happens, the crosstalk happens. And then if you're not loud enough, you get cut out. So it's very important that when you're going into a discussion or a meeting where you feel you really need to be heard, do your homework, do your thought process. And sometimes it's not enough that you're doing a homework in terms of just you knowing the area, but know what you want, the outcome you want to get out of that meeting. If you know the outcome, then you can actually phrase your discussion in a much more precise and concise way that will capture the audience's imagination. So almost always it is about, can you connect with your audience? Can you put across the most salient or important point without rambling? And get them to then later act, right? That becomes so again, you're flipping the situation where you're saying, okay, you're putting yourself in a point of control. And that is a very important learning that I had from that atmosphere. Ben Horowitz is one of the best, I would say at a heart, a product manager and probably the best thinker from a product perspective. And I learned a lot from that experience. And I would say going through the process of building a startup with a team and then having it be sold was truly exciting. And after that, I left Loud Cloud, which became Opsware, and joined a company called Marimba, which was run by a woman CEO, Kim Polesi. Was definitely a rising star at that time. By the time I was building out a lot of the data center products, and I built out the data center management platform for Marimba, and we sold Marimba within a year and a half to BMC Software. So I loved my, I thought going into a larger company, I would not stay there for too long because I felt I was more like a startup person, wanted to move things faster. But then I actually ended up loving BMC. So in general, I tell people it's surprising. I tend to really enjoy and love the jobs that I have done and that I take. And again, to some extent, I connected back to the mindset, right? You can make the job be what you want it to be. So at BMC, I spent some time. I ran the again what we call the business service management practice, which included IT service management and help desk. It included monitoring and troubleshooting for various environments and automation and provisioning. So after a few years at BMC, I wasn't really looking out. A recruiter called me and said, "Hey, I have a professor from Stanford who would love to chat with you." I said, "Look, I'm not looking out," but at the same time, I said, "Okay, it might be a worthwhile conversation." So I went and had coffee with a professor from Stanford. Her name is Monica Lam. Really diminutive, tiny woman, but a powerhouse of energy and ideas. And we were supposed to meet for 45 minutes. I think we ended up meeting for over 2 hours and just really hit it off with Monica Lam on her ideas. And she, with her PhD students, was building this a startup in the desktop virtualization space. And the idea was, can you encapsulate? At that time, again, collaboration software was not on the cloud yet, but the idea was, can you encapsulate your entire desktop and its applications, right, in a virtualization bubble, put it on a USB key, or put it on a remote laptop and make it available. So for remote type of work from home situations, for mobile travel, for a bring your own device type of scenario, that was just a great solution. I was very intrigued by the solution, but at the same time, I was having a lot of fun and doing well at BMC. But at the end of it, I said, okay, it is okay to take a risk. Yeah, it was a young startup, fresh startup, no product market fit yet. We were still trying to figure out how to land customers. But I decided that was worthwhile taking a risk. So I joined Mocha 5, and I would say some of my exciting years were at Mocha 5. One of the brightest teams that I have worked with was at Mocha 5. And we built this desktop management solution as a team, the camaraderie that we built, and I got to not only do products and engineering, but also I ran sales operations, I ran marketing, I ran, and eventually I became the chief operating officer for Mocha 5. So even though it was initially a risk, what it did do was it truly broadened my horizons. So I think as you're thinking about your career progressions, my next main takeaway for you is it's okay to take risks. It's okay to take risks, and sometimes those risks almost always the risks will have their rewards. Sometimes they may end up in a massive success, as you would think about in success as defined in terms of the industry. Or sometimes it may be a failure. But either way, there are going to be rewards and tons of learning. Now, this is just one kind of risk. Another kind of risk that you could take is within your organization, look at other roles. These could be lateral roles, or this could be types of roles that you're uncomfortable with, but you're always have been intrigued. Maybe you're in technology and product space and you want to do some sales or sales operations. Um, Thinking and broadening your horizon and looking around uh, for things that you would like to contribute to, having that energy and then drive and to take action on it is important. Don't just get held back because you are thinking too much about the risks of moving or risks of changing your roles. And so the risk that I took with Mocha 5 was really something that I would say, when I look back, a rewarding one. We ended up eventually, Mocha 5 got sold, albeit it was not a big win. The was bought by a consortium of Google and Microsoft, and then I ended up getting a role as a CEO of a startup in the cloud security space. And it was interesting. This startup was a Japanese company that had wanted to enter into the management space. They bought a company in the network change and configuration management space, and they wanted a foot in the door in Silicon Valley. And so they bought the company, didn't really know how to grow it. So they said, okay, please come be the CEO and help grow it. And once the name of the company was Cavern, and once I landed there, I realized that it was a very commodity market. There were already very large players like SolarWinds. And so it would have either taken a ton of marketing dollars or a massive amount of product innovation to have some differentiation to go in this market. So I decided to go back to my board and say that, look, the product as it stands will not be competitive. So we need to not go with the current approach. We need to can the sales. We need to rebuild the product and go to the market. Now, my board was a Japanese board. And I found in my first few months as I was presenting to the board that my chairman of the board would never make eye contact. And it really bothered me. I would come back and wonder, am I not making sense? Are they not understanding what I'm trying to tell them in terms of what needs to really change in the company? We have to really rebuild the product. So we have to rebuild the product. We have to go after a new market. Or are they not understanding what I'm saying? And eventually, after a couple of months, I realized that this is just and this is something that I internalized, this is probably just something cultural. I would not get very definitive answers. I would not get straight up confrontation in the board meeting. I would not get a yes or a no. And so I realized that it is probably cultural. And it was my bias that immediately assumed that they had something against me when it was nothing really against me. So one thing that I would warn you is that remember, you all have biases too. You may look at someone and say, oh, that person is not listening to me, or that person probably will not care about what I have to say because of the way they look, or because of the way they are speaking, or because of their background. And we make a lot of assumptions. And many times I find, especially women in technology, and women make conclusions and assume biases that are not there, that are negative or detrimental to them. So always remember that others have biases, and there are different types of biases. You're not the only other. It's not just that people have biases towards you, but you have biases, and that's just human. And so if you accept that fact, then it really makes things much easier. So I went back to the board and said, it doesn't matter whether I have eye contact or not. I'm going to present a clear plan. I'm going to present the options. And it was interesting. Eventually, the board approved that plan. We ended up pausing development on the current product and repurposed the product towards cloud security, which was actually a good thing, because it allowed us to target a market that was growing. It allowed us to leverage the core technology. It allowed us to land new customers and gain market presence. So again, my takeaway is, remember that your own biases also hold you back. So when you want to think as a leader, and especially when you are thinking not just about yourself, but also about your people, remember that you have to truly nurture nurture that idea and be open to everybody's idea. So after some time at Kavrin, I realized that I would like to actually, I was working 24/7, and I said, okay, if I'm doing all of that work, I'd like to do something on my own. So I left Kavrin and actually incubated a startup. Now, this was another risk, and it was a startup in the container security, container management space. I had a little team. We worked on it for about 8 to 9 months, but then I realized that the go-to market was not there. There was not a clear line of sight to monetization. But at that time, VMware came knocking, and it was a very interesting role. It was to be the vice president of products for the cloud management business. Basically, when I say products, it was product management, an area that I loved. So I decided to actually take that opportunity. So my takeaway was that it's sometimes okay to take risks and fail, because it gave me exposure to a whole bunch of new areas. Container management was a very important area, and that also opened up the opportunity with VMware for me. So at VMware, I started off as a VP of products, and then after a few years, I was given the role of, I was asked to lead the cloud automation business as a GM. And now, most recently, I have expanded my scope, and now I'm running I'm the GM and, for the entire cloud management business, which includes cloud automation, cloud monitoring, cloud costing, cloud network analysis, log management, and so on. So it's a large business. It's the second largest business for VMware outside of vSphere. We are growing pretty well in the market. And most importantly, we have set a cultural mindset where it is almost a startup-like feel, but you do have the benefit of working in a bigger ecosystem. We care a lot about diversity and inclusion, because I firmly believe that sometimes when you just put diversity in terms of numbers, you need to get X% people or Y% background, you forget that people start thinking of it as a tax. But I strictly believe that you get to better outcomes when you have diverse perspectives. So if you have a team that is all women, hire some men. If you have a team that is all from one particular part of the world, hire some people from other parts of the world. Because new backgrounds and bring new perspectives. And so your solution space, instead of being this tiny solution space, becomes a much broader solution space. And you get to a better answer. Almost 2 years at VMware, into VMware, I attended a leadership summit where a professor from Chicago came and talked about the value of diversity and diversity of thought, ideas, race, everything. And it was an experiment where they took a team and created what they would call a classic A team, right? They looked very similar, top schools, homogenous looking. And then they created another team, which was B team, which was very mixed, had multiple cultures, multiple educational backgrounds, multiple schools and universities. And they were given problems to solve. And almost always the B team did a better job and more collaborative job of solving the problems. And it was because they had more perspectives. They were not all doing groupthink. So diversity of perspectives is strictly good, and when you're able to bring that to bear, you get to a better answer. And so maybe the last thing that I would tell you is, all of you are, as you bring in your path to becoming leaders, also become a mentor, help others. And one of the nice things about being a mentor is you will start getting insight into how others think. As you are brainstorming and discussing problems with the people you're mentoring, you get a different perspective. And with that perspective, you can lead much better, right? And not only does it make you a better people leader, but it also, as I said, broadens your solution space and allows you to become a better technology leader. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and good luck, and hope you had a good time with VMware Nirmaan 2021.